class, you are going to be breaking down a standard. It's fine if you decide you want to use the standard that you already did some unpacking of last week in the discussion, but you don't have to use that standard unless you want to. What you are required to do is to use a Common Core state standard for English language arts or for math, and to use those standards either at the kindergarten, first grade, or second grade level. So once you pick your standard, you'll copy and paste it here. If it's a Common Core math or ELA standard, will go here, and the grade level will go here. And that's really all that needs to go into these sections. Next, as you recall, this part is easy if you are going to use the standard that you already unpacked for discussion, because here you will be listing the verbs within the standard. And these are the skills or things that you would expect the students to be able to do or demonstrate. That's going to align then very closely with the behavior part of your objective, which we'll get to in just a few minutes. Remember, the concepts are the nouns within the standard, and those are the things that the students would need to know. So again, once we have these two pieces, it makes it a lot easier for us to write our objectives, which will be on the next page, because we've already defined what it is that students will need to know and to be able to demonstrate to master this standard. All right. Under this, the rigor, you will highlight the levels of Bloom's that you will be covering in your lower level and higher level objectives. All right. So if you are in your lower level objective asking students to apply something that they have learned, then you would highlight apply. And then in the higher level objective, if you're asking them to analyze the similarities and differences between two things, you would highlight those two as the levels of Bloom's that you're addressing in your lower and higher level objectives. Okay, just to kind of reinforce this, we'll go over to the example. You see here that the person has our standard, the content area, grade level. They've pulled out the verbs from the standard and listed those here, as well as the concepts of what students would need to know to be able to successfully achieve this standard. What they didn't do is highlight the levels of Bloom's. So let's take a look at their higher and lower level objectives and see if we can figure that out together. So their objective at the lower level is at the end of the lesson, students will be able to identify, so that's our behavior, identify at least 3 shapes. So that's our degree, right? Remember, at least 3 shapes found in the room independently by pointing to the shape. All right, so the independently by pointing to the shape is the condition. Remember, in our objectives, we always want to have the audience, behavior, condition, and degree. All right, so the shapes that they're going to be able to point to are triangles, squares, circles, cubes, and spheres. So students being able to identify shapes, they're only having to recall and point to those shapes would probably just be at the remember level of Bloom's. All right. So then we'll come back to this assumed knowledge here in a few seconds. So then remember, for the performance criteria, this is where you would define exactly what you would expect to see if students were able to master or achieve this objective. So you would probably be observing the children going around the classroom, looking to find the shapes. You would observe them pointing to the shapes, all of those different types of things. All right, so that's exactly what you would expect to see if students were doing what we ask them to do in this objective. All right, so then at the higher level, remember, lower level is remember, understand, apply. Higher level is analyze, evaluate, and create. So at the higher level, we have at the end of the lesson, independently, so again, these are our conditions, students will be able to construct, so that's our behavior, that's what we expect to see them doing. What are they going to construct? They're going to construct at least 5 shapes found in the classroom environment from the components of their choice. So they can use clay, sticks, or Play-Doh. All right. So if we're asking them to construct, it's probably moving up into this level of create, right? Because they're applying what they've learned to be able to create something that demonstrates their understanding of the different shapes that we're hoping that they learn. Okay, so again, performance criteria, exactly what you would be expecting students to do that you would observe and see. So you would expect to see them creating models of the shapes in the environment. They would be creating at least 5 different shapes. They would identify the shape names, they would choose the components, and then they would be able to actually create those shapes out of the materials of their choice. So that's the performance criteria. All right, so those are how we are kind of linking together the standard, breaking it down here, rewriting the standard in your own words, which we didn't talk about, but we will here in just a second, and thinking through then the lower, higher level objectives along with the performance criteria. So now let's think about these 2 pieces that you'll be doing as a part of this assignment as well. So after you have broken down the standard by the verbs, the nouns, and the level of blooms that you want to address, then you can go back to the standard and think about, if I were going to be teaching this, what would it look like? How would I break this down? And sometimes people get a little bit too make this more complicated than it needs to be, because really it's things like the students will be able to demonstrate their knowledge of shapes. They'll be able to build shapes with materials from the classroom. They'll be able to draw shapes from, shapes that they see in the classroom. So this is just breaking it down, and this will help you then when you think about the objectives that you want to write later. We spent quite a bit of time last week talking about the prior knowledge or understanding that students would have probably related to the standard. So here you're going to write things that students would probably already know or hopefully know before you ever begin this lesson. Remember, like we talked about in class last week, this is much easier to do when you're writing this or doing this for an actual group of students, because you have some firsthand knowledge of what they're capable of and what they're not, right? Since you're writing this for a group of students that are, fictional, that you're making up, you can really only go from what you would assume students in that age range or grade level would know. It's sometimes helpful to go back to the standards for the year before to get a better understanding of what to include here. But those are the types of things that you would put in this section. All right, the last part is thinking through some possible lesson or activity ideas that will really help you as you move into writing your large and small group lesson plans, which is one of the next things that you'll be doing for the end of this class. Okay, so here, it can be that, books that you might use, activities that you might have students do, videos that you might show, that kind of thing. That again will help you when you move to working on your lesson. And just keep in mind that your large group lesson will be based on what you write in your lower level objective, and your small group lesson will be based on what you write for the higher level objective. All right,